KVOA 4 Tucson, this is Eyewitness News 4 Impact.
Good morning, I'm Elizabeth Val. Thank you for joining Eyewitness News 4 Impact. For more than a month now, the entire country's been gripped by the devastation of Hurricane Katrina along the Gulf Coast, watching horrible pictures of destruction and pictures of revival and cleanup. We've watched the largest non-governmental relief effort ever, and I'm joined by two Tucsonans now who were a part of it. Dr. John Arnold, CEO of the nonprofit Project PPEP. Thank you for joining us. And also George Long, who's a housing development specialist. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Well, I thought, we've been watching so closely relief efforts and trying to help people along the Gulf Coast, and it'd be nice to hear from people who were actually there themselves. I understand you guys were part of the first truckload of supplies in partnership with World Care to arrive. First you went through Alabama and then brought them all to a center in Mississippi, correct?
That's correct. And also we had LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, that paid for the first trucks and the expenses to go. And then World Care has been fantastic, and they have sent 10 18-wheelers since that time. Matter of fact, tonight there will be another one arriving at Clarksdale, which will be the 11th. We have a 60,000 square foot, which we hope will become a permanent relief distribution center there in Clarksdale. Mississippi. And then that will have sub-regional distributions in Mobile and in some of the other areas. So we're very excited about what Tucson has done, and we are very fortunate to have two farm worker organizations similar to PPEP in Mississippi and in Alabama with the Delta and the Telamon corporations, which actually were on the receiving end. So we have a great partnership here.
Wow. And so, to start off, tell me, about your trip, what you saw, what you experienced down there.
Well, I think the first thing is that I had the opportunity to fly down ahead of time, and when we got there, and George was following along with the three PPEP trucks, along with our PPEP employees that came along. We had people from our accounting department, we had people from our maintenance department, we had a number of people from our charter schools that were actually helping us with the relief effort, and they helped drive over there. But when I got there, I realized the facility they had was too small to receive the three trucks that we had coming. And then the Chamber of Commerce said, well, we have a 60,000 square foot, 10-acre facility with 3 loading docks and a railhead. Could you use that? And we said, yes, we could use that, because when the trucks came, we really could use that space. And we were able to load and unload these trucks with forklifts, and the loading docks have made it much easier. When the PPEP Tec charter school kids, we loaded in 107 degrees over at World Care. It was quite a bit of work to do, but to have that kind of a facility, we're very excited about. And then we have the situation where George led our PPEP staff over there, and he might share a few things on his 1,500-mile trip.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. Well, we left on a Friday at about 1 o'clock, and we arrived in Clarksdale, Mississippi, at approximately 6:30 Sunday evening, and we were met at the really the county border by the sheriff. The sheriff office sent someone to escort us in. We had been driving for at least 2.5 straight days. Most of the people, well, I'm the only one who had driven that distance in a truck that size. I'd done it a couple of times driving to Louisiana. So I was able to help everyone pace themselves as we drove from Tucson to Mississippi. When we got there, we were met by the sheriff. We went to the Mississippi Delta Council office, Mississippi Delta Council for Farm Work Opportunity, where Mr. Don Green is the executive director. And they received us, and we spent the evening, and the next morning, that's when Dr. Arnold mentioned we went to look at the warehouse, which was, really good that they had provided this huge warehouse for us. And, they didn't have a shortage of volunteers. It's a town of only about, 6,500 people.
Wow.
And they had a huge shelter in town, and they also had the people coming from everywhere just to help unload the trucks.
And where did all those supplies go?
Well, the supplies, first of all, have been put into the regional distribution center, and then other groups from around the state, word has gotten out very quickly. I think the first Saturday they had 200 farm workers come in, because we went out and visited the farm labor camps. Now, in that area, there are very few Spanish-speaking outreach workers, so I went out with the Mississippi Delta staff and translated, and we visited a number of farm labor camps. We told them about the center. We set up a special day for them to come in on Saturday when they could make it, when they weren't working, and word just spread like wildfire. So we've had a lot of that happen. Then we had Rita happen just as, well, the trucks were still in transit when that was going on. Then after that, more deadly than the 2 tornadoes or the 2 hurricanes in that area were 6 tornadoes, which just happened in the past 10 days. And we've had several farm worker communities and small agricultural communities in that area destroyed. Mississippi, that part of the country, they do a lot of cotton and peanuts and marlow. They do a lot of catfish farming. It was very agricultural. So most of the relief never gets out into those areas. And Mississippi is a state that in many cases has been forgotten. And it's very unfortunate, because when the disaster came, they really didn't have the resources, and they very much, as Don said, appreciated the hospital opened up their cafeteria, because it was very difficult to get a meal there because we had so many evacuees in the area. We were told the hotel, the next reservations were in December. They would be available in the hotels. So we were very fortunate that the other group that was there and received us and made sure we were taken care of.
And the focus of your trip was really to hit those rural areas that you said help us in getting to.
Well, in the farm worker areas, and this is not to put down organization, but I never saw FEMA, I never saw Red Cross, I never saw Salvation Army. None of those groups ever hit these small farm worker agricultural communities, and they may not be set up to do so.
Yeah.
And then we also have a concern that FEMA does not have Spanish-speaking workers, and most of the municipalities, the churches, the local law enforcement, they don't have people that are dealing with a very large Latino population that's coming in and harvesting the crops in that area. And so I think what Katrina and Rita have shown us is there's a whole nother situation been going on, a storm of disparity, there's a storm of discrimination. We found down in Alabama that farm workers have been very grossly mistreated. The law enforcement people are constantly stopping people for no reason. The people are afraid to report abuses or assaults. The women are afraid to report rapes because Florida is telling them that if they do so, they'll be deported. And so,
to give a little history for Project PEC for people who don't, you started off the national organization to help migrant workers.
We started out actually in Cerrito, Arizona, and not very national. It was a very small program that worked with Bracero migrant workers. In 1967, we had an old school bus named La Tortuga, the tortoise. I was the mechanic, the driver, and the teacher, and we started working and teaching farm workers practical educational things to prepare them to live in our society. So that's how we have evolved over the years. But we've been very concerned about issues of civil rights and about how people are treated and how people are abused. And I think we saw in the news just today where in Georgia there had been an assault on an immigrant farm worker camp where 6 Mexican nationals were killed, were murdered, and then we had another 6 that are in very, very serious condition. And that was only 100 miles from where we were working with the people in Fairhope, Alabama, which is right near there. And we saw the same kind of undercurrent anti-immigrant situation going on. And so we had a trip to Washington, D.C., and we talked to some of the civil rights people about trying to do something to get down there and take care of the abuse.
But you are a national organization now.
No, we're not a national organization. We're just
I mean, you have
local.
Contacts in different...
We have contacts through the Association of Farm Worker Opportunities is an association of organizations like PEP that work with farm workers in each state. And that's how we worked with the Mississippi Delta and the Telamon group, because we were part of that group. So we're not national, but we have a national focus because we're trying to help the 5.1 million migrant seasonal farm workers in this country that basically have the highest infant mortality rate in the nation. We have a 47-year life expectancy of people. and they're probably the most hazardous work. Arizona is the 6th largest agricultural state in the nation. We produce all the winter vegetables for North America in the wintertime in Yuma County. And so we have a very prominent place. And so when farm workers, migrant people, are affected, whether it's Mississippi or Alabama or in Yuma, we have a real concern about it, and so does our national organization.
Well, let's look at some of the pictures that you brought back with you, I think, to really kind of show people what you all dealt with.
And this was the Catholic Church in the Biloxi area as they were having services there, and this is all that was left was a couple of poles that were in that area. And this was typical of what we saw. Most of the landscape in that area was very seriously devastated. In some of the areas, we just saw the cement steps leading up to what would be someone's home. In some cases, we saw a foundation, and the yard looked like it had been very neatly manicured, but the wind up to gusts of 200 miles an hour had just completely swept everything, the trees and the grass, and just the foundation was left. And there was no trace of where these things once were, where these homes and neighborhoods and business districts and things like that were located. They were just totally eliminated.
It's like a moonscape almost.
Right.
Let's look to the, oh, there it is.
This particular picture is a PPEP Tec high school. We're a very fortunate Project PEP. We operate one of the largest charter school systems, rural systems in the country for at-risk kids. And we have 13 high schools, and these kids throughout the state, our 13 campuses, were able to collect a lot of things, take them to World Care, but World Care actually was the biggest partner. And here's actually Don arriving in Clarksdale, and they were kind of tired when this picture came up, but this is when, in the van in the front there, Project PEP donated full of computers to be used for the relief effort, and then for communication, and later on we hope to have a training center within the regional distribution center. Wow. It has 60,000 square feet, and we're trying to talk the government into making that not only a permanent warehouse, but to train people in the southwest or southeast area how to operate emergency warehouse, how to inventory, how to do accountability, how to set up for distribution. So when this happens again, they have trained people, that, and this center would be fully stocked and be available for future emergencies. But the best thing that we can do is to provide the training. Now, World Care, we're hoping will be the ones that will go down, because they have the expertise to train the workers in the Alabama and Mississippi area how to operate a center such as they have here in Tucson.
Certainly doing more than just delivering supplies.
That's right. We're preparing for the future. And I think this is something that has been pointed out, that we have to take care of the present, but we also have to start preparing for the future. And this center, we're trying to raise the $650,000. That was one of the other reasons that we went to Washington last week. We met with Secretary Gutierrez, who's the Secretary of Commerce. We met with the Undersecretary of USDA and HUD. And we're trying to buy the facility, put it in the hands of the people there locally in Clarksdale. That will become a permanent distribution facility along with the training center we talked about.
Wow. Let's move on to some more of the pictures and have you kind of explain.
We were very fortunate. This is when we first arrived. This is an interesting picture because we have the Mississippi Delta Farm Worker Council is primarily African American. And then we had the farm worker clients that were basically Hispanic. We had the LULAC president, Hector Flores, that flew in. And we kind of got everybody together, and we were huddling about what are we going to do. We had the situation where we have one hurricane there and another one coming. And it was kind of an opportunity where a number of people got together. We feel that the successful efforts there are going to be by the input of the people there. So that's why we collected the farm workers, the local elected officials, the African American community, which we think with the Latino community is extremely important. A month ago, before that, we had been in Little Rock, Arkansas with Jesse Jackson and LULAC, and they were talking about the New South, where the African American community, Latino community need to join together and help each other to overcome some of the inequities, injustice, and discrimination in that area.
Let's move on to the next picture.
This is just some of the business district down in the Gulfport, Biloxi area. One of the motels, it was just all that was there was just the rubble, and the sign somehow had survived. And The devastation is something that you don't believe. That's why we took the pictures. This is inside our 60,000 square foot facility there in Clarksdale. Matter of fact, this is when George arrived, and that was the first relief effort. That was the first convoy that had come in there. Also, this is kind of a signing over ceremony of the van and the computers. Those are our PEP staff that were volunteered in the background. They wanted to be part of that. We signed over. It was a 1998 Pontiac, and this is actually being used tomorrow to take down about 20 hygiene kits from Clarksdale down to Cleveland that was destroyed by the tornado. So, you know, everything's getting to be used very well. This is an immigrant community down in the Biloxi area. This is one of the streets that they cleared out. This is what it was, a actual area that was a business district. And it was a lot of immigrants. They were not just only Hispanic, but you had Asians and different people, because there were a lot of casinos that were in that area, floating casinos. And most of the casinos had been beached. One of them had been lifted so high up by the storm surge that fell on top of a 3-story hotel and just flattened it down.
Oh my goodness, that's
so this is just
unbelievable.
incredible forces that were there. And this is also another part of the immigrant community there, and one of the few houses that actually survived in the area. But the rubble was just incomprehensible. The streets have been cleared out, as you can see in this particular picture, but there was running sewage, there was all kinds of things, cars that were just smashed. This was the main intersection downtown where Biloxi and Gulfport kind of come together. There are two communities that are very much side to side, as is Pascagoula, Mississippi, which we visited from the Alabama side because we couldn't get in through Highway 90 that had been destroyed. So the whole Gulf region experienced very much devastation. And the scary thing is people like this, that we were in, this is a family that came in to the Mississippi Delta office. The farm worker family had just arrived. We had the same time the hurricanes were going on, the migrant season was starting out of Texas, and the families were starting to arrive, finding out agriculture was not up and running, things were wet in the fields. So this distribution center helped people that were not immediately affected by the disaster, but indirectly were, because they were coming up, the whole migrant stream comes up, thousands of families, and they were getting there and no work, so the food in the center was extremely important to have there at that particular time. Matter of fact, the camps that we visited were just that week beginning to become fairly heavily populated. Once again, this is down in the devastated area, some of the neighborhoods, the immigrant neighborhoods that we were working with and focusing on. This is interesting. This is right near that area where the farm workers were murdered in Georgia, but this happened to be in Fairhope, Alabama, and Baldwin County, where there's a lot of peanuts and different things that are growing there. And these farm workers were telling us that night, we were there with a Mexican consulate, about the blatant abuses of being stopped, being charged $1,800 non-refundable deposit to move into a dilapidated trailer. If they were a day late, they were confiscating their vehicles, they were throwing their furniture out, all kinds of intimidation going on in that area, and it's very heavily anti-immigrant. So when I saw the story about the assault in the camp in Georgia, that it was a robbery, I just don't believe that. I think it was a deliberate attempt and assault on these people, and that resulted in the death of 6 farm workers and 5 or 6 more that may actually die from this incident. I know President Fox of the Mexican government is extremely concerned about it, because when they were in Alabama, they went along with us, and we saw the same kind of abuses starting to take root there.
And you were also saying, you know, as far as the housing issue and, you know, charging $1,800 for a dilapidated, you know, mobile home. George, you were saying that's a big issue you were trying to tackle as a housing specialist, because you were saying all the people from New Orleans who escaped with money, you know, were buying up all the properties, so the prices have gone up, and no one who lost their homes can find a home.
That's right. And also, you know, along with that, with the Mississippi Delta Council, they had asked us if we could help them establish a housing department. And we would use the same approach that we've used with other organizations throughout the West Coast in helping provide farm worker housing and low-income homes. That's something that I've, through my own research, checking through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, I haven't seen very many or any organizations who are focusing on that part of the population. And so our efforts would be to help them establish, provide technical assistance to them so that they can get up and running and start providing the homes for low income who are the ones who are suffering, and farm workers.
I'm sure there's more to discuss on this. We have to take a commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us. We're back this morning on Eyewitness News for Impact, discussing relief efforts along the Gulf Coast to help those suffering from Hurricane Katrina. I'm joined by two guests, Dr. John Arnold, CEO of the nonprofit Project PEP, and also George Long, a housing development specialist. You both spent 6 days, well, you traveled 5 days, but bringing down supplies directly to distribution centers in Mississippi. And on top of that, been working side by side with government down in Mississippi to get things up and running, helping with housing, helping create distribution centers. And we just, have you this morning to kind of give us firsthand experiences, what you saw and what you experienced. Primarily, we were just talking in the previous segment about George, about helping set up a housing authority to help all those people, because it's almost overwhelming for most of us who aren't familiar with that kind of public sector. How are these people going to begin? How do you start when they're all so scattered and have nothing left?
Well, everyone who have been involved in the living in the area where the hurricane, has struck, had somewhere. So a lot of people would like to return to their same neighborhoods. It's going to be rebuilt, but the rebuilding, from my observation, is not really focused on the people that we have been looking toward helping. And so with our efforts to help establish the housing department.
And that's in rural areas you're discussing.
In rural areas.
You
and
guys,
also
that's
civil.
another good point. You guys were really focusing on the rural areas where...
That's right. And even here in Arizona, we focus in strictly rural areas and throughout the West Coast with the coalition that we're leading here.
Which is good, so that you have the experience to help.
That's right.
In those areas, you know who to call, whereas you said you didn't see a single FEMA or Red Cross representative, which, I think their programs are designed to just hit the places where they make the most impact.
We did see one evidence of FEMA. There was, I think, 200,000 trailers that had been set up to get into the relief area, and I believe to date only 109,000 have been delivered. And so this is kind of typical of some of the response that we saw by government. We saw the money from the federal government being basically shipped out into the private sector to personnel agencies to find jobs for rural people and farm workers and others that really don't know who farm workers are. I think a lot of people think groceries grow on the shelves of grocery stores many times, and the relief is not getting out there. We're seeing a lot of money being put into what they call workforce investment boards. Now, we have a wonderful one here in Pima County. It's one of the best in the country, Pima County Workforce. But the one in Mississippi that serves Clarksdale, they haven't had a meeting since July, so how are they going to be getting the relief out? Now, this may not be so much a criticism of them. They may have lost their homes and scattered, but they're using mechanisms that are not really workable. We were talking to some of the governmental people about how they're getting word out to people when there's an emergency. Well, they're using the FEMA website. Well, farm workers don't have computers, and of course,
neither did anybody else.
No, and the electricity was down, and the radios, they were using radio, but a lot of it was not user-friendly in Spanish. So we have the government that just does not know how to respond to the kind of people that we are. And rather than be critical of them, we said, let's us do something. And that's why we formed this whole thing and saying, look, if the government's not able to do it, then we're going to go with LULAC, we'll go with World Care, we'll get our PPEP Tec high schools and the generosity of the Tucson, Pima County area.
10 18-wheelers full of supplies, one 26-footer, and you say you were quite proud of being part of the largest interstate non-governmental relief
And I
effort.
think-
And it's,
exactly.
I understand it's still continuing. We have just a little time left here this morning to discuss, what more do you recommend if people want to help to do, or just in general you recommend?
Well, I think
being
it's very
done?
important to continue to support World Care. They are a wonderful organization, Lisa, the director, and Pam that are there. They do a tremendous job for this community, and I've known them for a long time and worked with them through several relief. They're like us. They're nonprofit. We don't have any extra money. We just live off what people give us, and I think we ought to do as much as we can for that particular organization. I think that I want to also thank the youth in San Luis, Arizona. We had the farm worker kids stand out in 110 degrees heat, raised $1,075 in 2 days, and that's going to the relief. And that's another thing people can do. They can make a donation to Project PEP, which in turn sends the whole 100% of the dollars down to Clarksdale to help provide relief for the operation of the center, and then we should continue to give what we give to World Care, because that's the collecting agency. That's the other part of the conduit, and I just think that those kind of partnerships show that we can do great things as organizations and we don't need government money to do it. And I also congratulate the people here in Tucson, what they did at the community center for the evacuees. Tucson, I think, probably has a gold star somewhere for all the work that they have done.
That's for sure. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and it was nice to get a clearer picture of for firsthand experiences down there, and it's nice to know that organizations like yourself who have the right contacts with the people who are directly helping those who need it, are continuing to send support over there, and into the rural communities, which, like you said, I think have been overlooked a bit in the midst of this disaster, from what you've been telling us from your experience. So I guess we'd all have to thank you and say keep up the good work, and keep us posted.
And we want to thank Channel 4. All of the relief efforts we've done in the past, we've had great cooperation from the media here locally, especially Channel 4.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. See you next week.